The interstellar spaceship Avalon can be seen moving through space, heading to a colonized planet called Homestead 2. All the rooms are empty, and the ship runs on autopilot. The 258 crew and 5,000 passengers are all asleep in hibernation. Suddenly, the ship enters an asteroid belt, which starts to weaken its shields. Power is sent to the main shield, but the ship heads straight for a huge asteroid. Then the asteroid hits the ship, causing different systems to fail. The ship starts fixing itself, but one hibernation pod turns on. The person who wakes up is Jim Preston, a mechanical engineer. His pod opens, and an automated system helps wake him up, telling him he spent 120 years in hibernation and that the ship is just 4 months away from Homestead 2. He's told he can enjoy the luxurious features of the ship during the remaining time. Jim receives instructions about his ID band, his assigned cabin, and the activities available before they reach the new planet. Excited yet nervous to meet others, he gets ready, leaves his cabin, and walks into an automated class meant for a large group. Feeling a bit anxious, he listens as a hologram explains Earth's condition: overpopulated, overpriced, and overrated. It asks him to save his questions for the end, but Jim keeps asking why he's the only one there. Realizing the hologram can't help, he searches the ship for others. He reaches the main concourse but finds no one, though an automated info desk offers help. He asks to speak to a real person and is directed to a steward. When he finds no one there either, he asks for the captain. At the bridge, though he can't get inside, he sees that none of the crew is awake. Eventually, he goes to the observatory and discovers that the ship is actually 90 years away from Homestead 2. Shocked, he rushes back and sends a message to Earth, asking for help. The system tells him the message will take 55 years to get a response. Jim is devastated. Wandering the ship, he finds the bar and meets someone at last. While talking with the guy at the bar, he noticed something odd. As the bartender goes to get him a drink, he looked, only to realize it's an android bartender named Arthur. Jim tries to explain his situation, but Arthur can't grasp how he woke up early. Jim wakes up in his cabin the next day and heads to the cantina, where he quickly notices that most of the menu is reserved for gold-class passengers. He settles for a plain coffee and starts thinking about how to fix his hibernation pod. After gathering the tools he needs, he manages to get the pod running and lies down inside it. But nothing happens. Still determined, he decides to use the tools to try and access the crew's hibernation chambers, but fails. Minor malfunctions start happening around the ship. Jim keeps returning to the bar, mainly to talk to Arthur. The android eventually encourages him to break into a gold-class room and enjoy the ship. Jim explores the ship's games, restaurants, and entertainment, but the loneliness soon overwhelms him. One day, Jim gets drunk and wanders around the hibernation pods, eventually stumbling into an airlock where spacesuits for spacewalks are stored. He suits up, steps into the airlock, and activates the release. Once outside the ship, he's overwhelmed by the breathtaking view alone, the only conscious human in space. He detaches the magnets from his boots and floats, devastated by his solitude. He returns inside and removes the suit, but soon walks back to the airlock without it, intent on ending his life. At the last second, he changes his mind, rushes back inside, and slips on a bottle. As he stands up, he's captivated by a woman in one of the pods, Aurora. Curious, he looks up her profile, listens to her interview, and becomes emotionally invested. He starts spending time near her pod, reading her writing, and talking to the android bartender, Arthur, about her. Jim becomes obsessed with the tragic irony of his situation. He set out for a better life, woke up early by mistake, and found his ideal partner only she's out of reach. As the days go by, he battles with the moral dilemma of waking her. He confides in Arthur, but the android doesn't understand human ethical conflict. If he woke her up for his own sake, he'd be leaving her stuck on the ship with him, with no way to return and no chance of survival. Jim initially resists the temptation, but loneliness wears him down. Eventually, he gives in and wakes Aurora. As she begins her orientation process, Jim hides. Later, he meets her in the concourse, acting as if their meeting is purely coincidental. He explains that they're the only ones awake and shows her around. He explains that he can't access the crew or the ship's main controls. Aurora panics and tries to return to her pod. When she asks about going back into hibernation, he breaks the news. There's no way to reverse the process. Shocked and heartbroken, Aurora realizes they're stranded. They return to the concourse, and he suggests she get some rest since she just came out of hibernation. Aurora sympathizes with Jim's year of isolation. Jim returns to the bar, weighed down by regret over his decision. He asks Arthur to keep his secret that he was the one who woke her. The next day, Aurora wakes up. She returns to the concourse and asks the automated info desk about the hibernation pods. Jim joins her, and they head to the cafeteria for breakfast. As they leave, the info desk glitches. At the cantina, Aurora notices that Jim has been eating the same basic meal for over a year, so she gets him something from the gold class menu. They discuss the possibility of fixing the pods, but unlike Jim, Aurora isn't ready to give up. Aurora starts investigating her situation. She looks into the pods and hibernation system, searches the infirmary, and even tries to break into the crew's quarters. Meanwhile, Jim notices growing malfunctions throughout the ship. Over time, Aurora settles into her new reality. She writes, jogs, and swims, becoming aware of her situation. She goes to the cantina to interview Jim, thinking his story might be worth telling. She asks why he chose to move to the colony. At first, Jim repeats company slogans, but then he admits that he wanted a fresh start, to become someone and build a life. Later, in the observatory, Aurora opens up about her own reason for joining the mission. Unlike the other passengers, she had a round-trip ticket. Her plan was to live on Homestead 2 for a year, return to Earth, and write a one-of-a-kind story as the first journalist to do so. As time passes, Aurora slowly starts to lose hope of fixing their situation. Jim tries to lift her spirits. He takes her dancing, to the cinema, and even to the basketball court. Finally, he introduces her to Arthur at the bar. For a moment, she seems to forget their problems. But the reality of being stranded hits her again, and Jim is left alone with Arthur, feeling guilty about the choice he made. Jim is next seen working on a small project, and later, Aurora walks into the observatory to find a miniature model of the Chrysler building that he made for her. Sometime later, they go on a date at the bar. Over dinner, they share personal stories, and Aurora opens up about losing her father when she was a teenager. After the meal, Jim takes her to the airlock where they both put on spacesuits and step outside the ship. They float together in space, experiencing the vast beauty of the cosmos. For Jim, it's a special moment finally being able to share this incredible view with someone. They return inside, kiss, and spend the night together. Soon, they begin living as a couple. Aurora moves into Jim's cabin and continues writing about her experiences on the ship. They develop a routine jogging, dining, and spending their days side by side. During one of Jim's explorations, he discovers the hydroponics bay and surprises Aurora with fresh flowers. On another day, as the ship passes near a red giant star, they visit the observatory to take in the breathtaking sight together. It's Aurora's birthday, and later that evening, she and Jim celebrate with dinner at one of the ship's restaurants, followed by drinks at the bar. While Jim steps away to the restroom to prepare a ring he made for her, Aurora stays behind and chats with Arthur, the android bartender. During their conversation, Arthur unknowingly reveals that Jim was the one who woke Aurora up from hibernation, unaware that it was meant to remain a secret. When Jim returns, Aurora confronts him in shock and disbelief. Overwhelmed, she runs away, furious and heartbroken. Jim returns to his cabin to find that Aurora has taken all her belongings. The next day, he sees her in the cantina and tries to speak to her, but she quickly leaves. Struggling to cope, Aurora eventually goes to Jim's cabin one night and physically lashes out at him in anger. Jim later attempts to talk to her over the ship's communication system, offering an apology and trying to explain what he did. He confesses that he fell in love with her. However, Aurora remains unable to forgive him for waking her up and taking away her future. One night, while Jim is alone in his cabin, the ship experiences another serious malfunction. The main command system shuts down. Later, while using the elevator, he notices it also begins to fail. Aurora, walking through the concourse, sees that Jim has planted a tree there, a sign of life in the vast emptiness of the ship. She then visits the cantina, where she notices the food dispensers are also malfunctioning. Suddenly, over the ship's intercom, both Jim and Aurora hear the voice of a crew member, Deck Chief Gus Mancuso, asking who planted the tree. They rush to the concourse and find him standing by the tree. After brief introductions, they explain their situation. Mancuso is shocked that 3 hibernation pods could malfunction. He takes them to the ship's bridge, where he begins to investigate. He confirms that something is wrong with the vessel's systems, but tells them that further data must be gathered and reviewed manually. As they leave the bridge, a robot suddenly falls from above, nearly hitting them. Jim and Aurora inform Mancuso that similar malfunctions have been occurring across the ship more frequently. Mancuso confirms that such issues should not be happening and begins showing them how to collect diagnostic data to investigate further. Later, while checking the hibernation pods, Mancuso is joined by Jim, who reveals what caused Aurora's pod to fail. Upon hearing the truth, the deck chief is clearly disturbed by Jim's actions. Back at the bridge, Mancuso continues reviewing the data when Aurora arrives. They discuss her pod's malfunction, but Mancuso admits there's nothing he can do to reverse the effects or reinitiate hibernation. Just then, Jim arrives carrying the 16th broken robot, further emphasizing the ship's deteriorating condition. Mancuso, showing signs of hibernation sickness, decides to rest. As he walks out, he unexpectedly coughs up blood, suggesting his condition is worsening. That night, unable to sleep, Aurora goes to the pool for a swim. Suddenly, a gravity failure causes the water in the pool to rise and shift violently, nearly drowning her. Fortunately, the gravity drive resets just in time, and she narrowly escapes. She and Jim meet in the hallway as they rush to find Mancuso. Back at the bridge, the three of them begin piecing together the sequence of failures. Mancuso concludes that a critical system failure occurred roughly 2 years ago. He explains that ever since, the ship has been compensating for the loss, overburdening its remaining systems. If they don't find the root cause and repair it soon, the entire ship will be in jeopardy. Jim and Aurora go searching for the root of the ship's problems with Mancuso, but the deck chief suddenly collapses. They rush him to the infirmary, where they learn that he's terminally ill. No treatment on board can help him. Later, the three meet in the observatory. Aware that his time is short, Mancuso gives Jim his ID bracelet and tells them to fix the ship. Moments later, he passes away. Almost immediately, the ship enters another crisis. The lights flash red and the vessel begins to shake. Jim realizes they need to get to engineering and takes Aurora with him. On the way, they encounter another malfunction, this time in the gravity drive, and Arthur also begins to malfunction. Jim has no choice but to deactivate the android. They finally reach engineering and begin searching for the issue. In the power plant, they discover a breach in the hull caused by an asteroid strike. As they open a hatch, Aurora gets pulled into the vacuum, and Jim nearly follows. He holds on but eventually gets sucked in as well. Together, they manage to seal the breach just in time. Jim soon realizes the damage is worse than they thought. There are multiple breaches. They follow the meteor's path and find that it also struck the reactor control computer. Jim believes he can replace the damaged parts. They find and install the replacement, but the automatic venting system still fails. They attempt to open the vent manually, but that too doesn't work. Jim concludes that someone must go outside the ship and hold the vent open manually so the reactor can cool. They prepare for the spacewalk, and before he leaves, Jim gives Aurora Mancuso's bracelet, just in case he doesn't return. She helps him suit up, and as he steps into the airlock, she tells him she can't live without him. While Aurora monitors the overheating reactor from inside, Jim makes his way toward the vent. As the temperature in the reactor room rises, a bolt from the machinery strikes Aurora in the arm. Outside, Jim locates the vent and struggles to bypass the door. He soon realizes he must physically hold the door open to allow the system to release its pressure. He informs Aurora, who protests, not wanting him to sacrifice himself. They argue, but he insists that saving the lives of the 5,000 people on board is worth it. Aurora vents the reactor, and the system successfully cools down. But the blast from the release knocks Jim away, breaking his tether and causing his suit's pressure to drop. He tells Aurora what happened, and she rushes to put on another suit to rescue him. She flies out, but her tether is too short. Just as she's pulled back, she manages to grab Jim's broken tether and drags him back into the ship. She brings him to the infirmary, only to discover that he has already died. Desperate, Aurora uses Mancuso's bracelet to override the system and triggers the medical pod's emergency protocols. It works. Jim is revived. Moved by the experience, Aurora forgives him. Later, she repairs Arthur, and the two of them give Mancuso a respectful space burial. Jim then takes Aurora back to the infirmary and reveals a discovery. He has figured out how to use the medical pod to place someone back into hibernation. He offers her the chance to sleep through the remainder of the journey, but as it's revealed later, Aurora chooses to stay awake with him. Eventually, Jim proposes, and the two live out their lives together on the ship. 88 years later, the Avalon finally reaches Homestead 2. The crew wakes up to find the ship transformed. Aurora has left a message for them, recounting the story of the life she and Jim built while everyone else was asleep.